Joining us now, we have retired four-star Army General Barry McCaffrey. He's an NBC News military analyst and former Israeli ambassador to the United States, Michael Oren. I'll start with General McCaffrey. Just curious where you think things stand now in terms of a possible ceasefire. It just feels like it's a long way off.
Well, I would think within a month there'll be some sustainable ceasefire going on in Gaza. Both sides are losing badly. Israel in the information war and Hamas with their final four undestroyed battalions and the senior leadership in Rafah. So I think that, at the end of these negotiations, Mika, there's always painful last-minute bait and switch going on, which I think Hamas is doing now. But we ought to recognize that what Israel is trying to do tactically is get all the hostages, dead or alive, returned. And strategically, they're not going to accept Hamas again governing Gaza. So the longer term is, I would be very pessimistic that there'll be any sustainable peace, never mind a two-state solution.
Ambassador Oren, is there anything about this proposal that gives you hope?
Not much, and I agree with General McCaffrey, Mika, unfortunately, and good morning. This is a proposal basically for Hamas to emerge from the tunnels, to reclaim control over Gaza, to reorganize, to rearm, and mount the next assault against Israel. And its leaders make no attempt to dissemble that. They said they're going to do it 50 times, 10,000 times until Israel is destroyed. And so Israel cannot agree to what Hamas wants, which is a permanent ceasefire, according to this agreement, under an international umbrella that will enable Hamas to do just that. Israel has to agree to a situation where it can end Hamas's rule, uproot Hamas, and perhaps open the door to a peaceful and prosperous Gaza. At the same time, Israel has to get its hostages back. Our hostages, 132 hostages, we know there. We hope that most of them are alive. We know that not all of them are alive. And the only way that Israel sees forward to doing this is by maintaining some element of pressure on Hamas. The operations taken in Rafah so far have been limited in scope, and hopefully that will meet the requirements of the Biden administration, which says that Israel can maintain surgical operations in Gaza, but not take over Rafah completely. So I think Israel would like to avoid as much as possible a head-on sort of collision with the Biden administration and try to stay on the same page for as much as possible. But at the end of the day, the goal has to remain uprooting Hamas and restoring our hostages to freedom.
General McCaffrey, can you speak to the tactical challenge of going back into Rafah for the IDF, a place where we know Hamas terrorists are living in tunnels underground, holding Israeli hostages underground? They know it's an urban environment they're very familiar with. They've prepared for this moment as Israel tries to encourage 100,000 Gazans to move out of part of the city ahead of the operation. How difficult is this for Israel and its army?
Yeah, it's really remarkable in my mind how few casualties the IDF has sustained. I think they're up to a couple of thousand killed and wounded. And part of that's been because they've used, to the extent they could, precision heavy weapons, 155 artillery and aerial attack to reduce these strongholds. But at the end of the day, you got a couple of million people, now 1.4 million probably in the Rafah area, and you're trying to get in there with an armored brigade and some special forces troops to get at the senior leadership, which is underground. So the civilian population will be in great peril unless they are moved out of the area. The Israelis are trying to provide a safe area. But again, these are massive throngs of suffering civilians. I think the IDF is acutely aware that they're under such international scrutiny. And we ought to remind ourselves also that Israel's had 80,000 some odd refugees up in the north under constant fire from Hezbollah forces, and maybe 100,000 along the Gaza Strip. So Israel also has a massive internal refugee problem. This is a tragedy that won't have a great outcome.
So, Mr. Ambassador, the U.S. has made clear to Israel that they understand it would support a limited operation into Rafah that was targeted simply Hamas terrorists. But the president has warned the prime minister time and again to not take on a full-on operation for risk of massive civilian casualties, but also for further turning the world and the region in particular against Israel. To this point in the conflict, the prime minister has only somewhat listened to the president's advice. What do you think he'll do now?
Well, listen, I'm not a spokesman for the government, and I wasn't privy to the conversation between the prime minister and the president that took place last night. But I'm sure the prime minister is taking note of the president's concerns, his reservations, and trying to meet them to the best degree possible that are consonant with Israel's basic security interests. And that is, again, ridding Gaza of Hamas and securing the release of the hostages. Just over 2 days ago, we had 4 soldiers killed by a Hamas barrage on our side of the border, which evokes October 7th again. So it just underlines the impossibility of maintaining the status quo. And by the way, Hamas is also shelling the crossover through which the aid goes through, because Hamas is counting on the aid stopping so that pressure will increase on Israel internationally to agree to a permanent ceasefire. Hamas is evil, but it's not stupid. And we have to end this situation the best degree possible. So I think, again, Israel will try to meet the president's concerns. At the end of the day, a sovereign country that is faced with an impossible security situation, both internally, as General Caffrey mentioned, but also along our own borders in the south, and with these hostages, just an intolerable situation that we must address.
Former Israeli ambassador to the United States, Michael Oren, and retired 4-star Army General Barry McCaffrey, thank you both very much for being on this morning. We appreciate it.